So hello everybody, and welcome back here to the main stage for the third main plenary session of today. So I hope you all enjoyed the three showcase sessions that we've just had running. And a reminder, if there were any of those that you missed, and there would have been, because obviously they were happening at the same time and you could only watch one of those, all of those showcase sessions, as well as all of the sessions that are happening here on the main stage, are all being recorded, have all been recorded, and links to all of those will be sent out to you following the completion of the proceedings today. So you'll be able to watch back anything that you have missed. So they'll be sent out to you later today. So we're on to the third session now. So this morning we started off by focusing on the 5G action plan, and we then moved on to look at the issue of investment and funding. The third session today is going to be looking at an issue that has been brought up throughout, I think, both of the sessions that we've had so far, that of digital sovereignty in Europe. And I think we're going to be looking at that in the context of looking maybe beyond 5G, so looking towards B5G, 6G, and those kind of areas. So without further ado, to explain more, I'm going to now pass over to our moderator for the session, to Mark Eschenberg from Ether. So Mark, welcome, good to see you, and yeah, looking forward to the session. So I'll pass over to you to explain in a lot more detail than I was able to. So looking forward to it, over to you.
Thanks very much, Dan, no pressure then. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this third session. As Dan has already said, this session is all about delivering a diverse, sustainable, and European-led ecosystem for 5G and beyond. It's quite an ambitious topic, one that we will aim to cover to the depth in the extent possible in the next 75 minutes. I have a great panel with me today, as always on the Forum Global conferences, but I'll talk about that in a second. As I said, it's quite an ambitious topic. And we will cover it in the usual format, which is we will first have contribution from each of the panelists for about 5 to 7 minutes, and that should leave us with hopefully in the range of 30 to 45 minutes for discussion. That discussion we should keep quite wide because it's as I said, it's an ambitious topic. There's a lot of different angles you can take, but for these panel contributions, we've agreed as a group to keep them very focused on the aspect of kind of what comes after 5G. As I said, we have a great panel. We have kind of a wide range of speakers from academia, from policy, from the industry, and I'm really looking forward to what they have to say on this topic and the contributions they will make. In total, we have 5 speakers today. We have Bernard Barny from the European Commission. Hello, Bernard. It's good to have you on the panel.
Good afternoon.
And we will start with Bernard's contribution on the topic, and then we will from there go through the other panelists, which I'll introduce step by step. So Bernard, for the next 5 to 7 minutes, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for introducing me. And maybe you can show the slide. Perfect, excellent. So I can see the slide. I hope it's visible for the viewers. And first of all, good afternoon, everyone, at least if you are watching from a European place. And that's my pleasure to tell you in very few words what we are doing today in the Commission on the 6G, what we call our 6G agenda. So on my side, I belong to the so-called Future Connectivity Systems unit in DG Connect. That's a unit whose main mission today is on 5G policy, but beyond 5G policy, we are now expanding the scope of our activities towards what comes next. That means beyond 5G and 6G. And this is within a certain context. First of all, in the context of the new commission that took office about 1 year ago. And you know that in this new commission, we have a very strong, let's say, focus on digital. That's one of the 6 priorities of the new commission. And within this priority, of course, the area or the aspect of sovereignty is coming to the forefront. And this is something we may want to expand a little bit later. But overall, altogether, in the let's say digital focus of the Commission, 6G has become an important topic out of many other topics such as artificial intelligence, high performance computing, and many other important issues. And in particular, last year, in the context of the Cybersecurity Toolbox communication, the Commission announced its interest to launch a public-private partnership for covering 6G in the next period. That means under the next multi-annual framework program, financial framework, sorry, that covers the period from now until 2027. So within this let's say, context, why are we doing this? Why are we moving beyond 5G at a moment when we barely see European deployment on 5G? We're doing it taking basically the kind of natural XG cycles, which is about 10 years. So if you look at the various cycles we have had from 2G to 5G, from the very early stages of research to the deployment, it takes about 8-10 years. So we believe it's now time to start thinking of the next cycle and what comes in 10 years time or 8 years time. So that's mainly the idea. And we believe this is very timely because when we look at the other regions, we see that in the US, we have seen several initiatives such as the 5G and Beyond Secure Act that announces, let's say, catalytic intention towards beyond 5G type of technological developments. We see also in the US the DoD platforms for 600 millions, which are now being financed, and also the initiative called the NextG. In Japan, the roadmap for 6G was published in June last year, in Korea in September, and we see also that China already started to work quite some time ago on that, end of 2019, I guess. And of course, in Europe, we have had the 6G flagship launched by our Finnish colleagues that Matti will explain a few in more details, and that already dates back to February 2020. So within the overall context, we believe that now, let's say, the overall international atmosphere is really ripe to start talking about this subject as a research subject. And we have on our side started to talk with stakeholders to try to understand what could be the next stage. So if you move to the next slide, please. I will try to explain in short, in very few details, some of the main characteristics we have seen emerging from the 6G discussion. This is very early days, so this might change in the future. This might be refined. This might come later. You know that today we don't have the equivalent of the ITU recommendation M2083, which was the vision document that kickstarted the 5G, let's say, developments, where they proposed this famous triangle, the famous ITU triangle. So I don't know if at the end of the day, this vision document, which is planned from the ITU, I believe, beginning of 2023, will have an hexagon shape, but on our side, we have tried to match it to, let's say, six sides. And on top of this slide, what you can see are kind of applications that could potentially drive a next generation. And what we believe is that the starting point, or let's say the 5G trend, which was initiated towards penetrating vertical use case, is something which will expand in the future and will probably provide requirements that go beyond 5G capabilities. So this is one track of applications that we see, let's say, happening these days, which means that we can already identify in specific environments such as factories or even automotive environments, requirements for use cases that go, let's say, beyond the millisecond latency or beyond the 20 gigabit per second speed, or beyond the 5.9 reliability performance, which have been set as performance objective for 5G. So this, we believe, is a trend which is going to expand and accelerate. So on the left-hand side, you can see new type of applications, such as what we call the Internet of Sense, which is the merging of communication and sensing, which means that we can take advantage of new technologies such as terahertz communications to have a better understanding of the surrounding environments, which is something completely new. Now, if I go to the middle, in very few words, we see a very strong interest to achieve the convergence between communication platforms and artificial intelligence. I mean, in 5G, we have seen some convergence with the cloud and IT environments. We believe that the next generation will perform a much more deep integration of artificial intelligence into the platforms. And at the bottom, which is very important for us, are all the societal issues which are on our agenda. It's on our policy agenda, but also it's also on our competitiveness agenda to have the technologies that we support being much more efficient in terms of energy efficiency, carbon footprint, in all covering the so-called sustainable development goals, including cheaper access to technologies. And I could go on and on this, but what is important is to look at the fact that from these sustainable development goals and societal goals, I think for most of them, we can match potential technological response. And this is what we are trying to develop these days. So the next slide, please. And this will be the last one. To make this in motion, we have started an exploratory phase of 6G project for about 60 million euros, where we have one flagship, which is called ExaX, with a number of projects which are companion projects looking into dedicated bits and pieces and technologies. But this is really fueling the big initiative that we are now planning, which is under construction at this moment in time, which is the so-called Smart Network and Services partnership proposal, which is a partnership proposal which will cover about 900 million euros financing from the next Horizon Europe, the Horizon Europe program, that we are developing in partnership with several industry associations which are covering connectivity, cloud, and IoT, because we want to take an end-to-end perspective. And this platform will have really two legs. One leg, which is the promotion of 5G deployment, which is through the CEF2 mechanism, which is just to accelerate 5G take-up in Europe, but also planning or developing in Europe the so-called 6G technologies to kind of support the leadership of the region and the industrial response to the challenges which are ahead of us. And this is my last slide, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, Bernard. Thanks very much for this introduction, understanding the kind of the European approach, so to say, to 6G. I think it's very interesting. I'm sure we'll have more to discuss in the panel later. The next speaker on our panel is Colin Wilcock. He's the chairman of the board for the 5G Infrastructure Association. Hello, Colin. Nice to have you on the panel.
Hi. Yeah.
It was all yours.
Thank you. Maybe we can share the slides. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of give the private side view on what Bernard has just actually presented. So in some ways, I'm going to be presenting a number of the same aspects, really trying to show the 6G research landscape in Europe, but also starting perhaps one step back, thinking about the 5G research landscape. So if I could have the next slide, please. So firstly, to explain who I am. So my name is Colin Wilcock, and I am chairman of the board of the 5G Infrastructure Association. And the 5G Infrastructure Association tries to be a group of not just large industry, but also SMEs, academics, and research institutes, which provides a voice to European industry in the broadest sense on all things 5G, and going forward, all things 6G. And one of the key activities that we have is running the current 5G PPP research program, which has developed a lot of what we think of as 5G technology. And equally in the future, we will be the association that will represent the private side in the Smart Networks and Services, which is this new research partnership that Bernard was talking about. So if I could go to the next slide, please. If we look back to the activities in 5G, then here we can see schematically what has happened in this 5G PPP partnership. And you will see that we started with a phase 1 where we created a lot of the fundamental technologies that we currently think of as 5G. So a lot of the concepts, a lot of the submissions to standardization came from that first set of projects. We then, in the second phase, very much looked at the verticals, so trying to bring the 5G technologies to the verticals and trying to understand the requirements of the verticals to feed in to further development of 5G. And in the last phase, where we are currently in, one of the main things we were doing was trying to build innovation platforms. So platforms, 5G platforms, where new ideas, new services, new verticals could be tried out. But phase 3 also has a new element, which I will come to in a minute, which is trying to bridge that gap from 5G to 6G. So maybe I can then go on to the next slide. So we see that the 5GPP has been a great success for Europe. In our view, the results, the things that it has achieved, both in terms of submissions to standardization, in terms of papers to conferences, on all of these sort of metrics, we think it's been a real success. And the point is that the last call of that program, the 5GPP, has now happened. So there are projects running, but there will be no new calls for projects. And clearly the development in cellular networks is not going to stop at this point. Now, we're still very much at the beginning of the story, the 5G story at the moment. So really the focus, or a lot of what's going on in product development and deployment, is 5G and indeed new services. And there's still plenty of development and research needed for 5G. But in 2030, we will probably be deploying 6G systems, and we need to start the fundamental research now. So when we look at this new proposal for a partnership called Smart Networks and Services, we wish to combine those two ideas. So we wish to continue the use of 5G, so bring it to new verticals, develop that technology, but also create the fundamental technologies, the foundations for 6G. And that is clear what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring all the key partners together in this European program to make 6G happen. We would welcome your participation. All of the information is on the net. Either just put in 5GIA or 5GPP, and all the information is there to join us in the association, to join us in that program. We would welcome that. So if I could go to the next slide. I just maybe finish it with showing the timeline to give some sort of feeling of where we are and where we're going. So you can see that we've had this 5GPP program that's been running from 2014 until 2023, something like that. And in the last phase of that, which has just started, we have begun to start with beyond 5G projects, so 6G projects, if you will. And we have a flagship project called HexaX, which is meant to tie all the pieces together. So build that bridge to 6G, build the bridge between 5G PPP and Smart Networks and Services. And as you'll see, Smart Networks and Services hopefully will be starting sort of towards the end of this year. And then that will go on until last call, something like 2027. So we've got 7 or 8 years of fundamental research, investing considerable amounts of money, somewhere around 900 million euros on pure research and innovation, trying to build the fundamentals of 6G. Okay, I think that's all I wish to say at this point. Thank you for your time.
Great, Colin, thanks very much. That was very, very interesting to understand that kind of where you sit and kind of understanding how to bridge the gap towards 6G. On the topic of 6G, I'm very pleased to have another perspective from the industry, this side, from the technology side. And for this, we have Wen Tong, who is the CTO of wireless networks at Huawei Technologies. Good afternoon, or in your case, good morning. We appreciate you joining us from all the way from Canada.
Hi.
The floor
Yes.
is all yours.
Okay. Yes. So I can start now. Thank you for all the distinguished panelists. I will start with the understanding of that our industry is taking the steps to explore the future of a mobile technology for the time frame of 2030 to 2050. we are working with wider ecosystem to share our minds and put together a picture of a common vision. It is clear our industry is entering even more exciting era during that time. That is a 6G. So can you turn the next page? Thank you. So 6G is the foundational platform for the future, or in a very nutshell, it will become an essential societal fabric, not only to change our business, but also transform our life. The primary impact of 6G is to take us from the digital economy to the intelligence economy. In addition to this, 6G is a platform for the enormous innovation in all domains. That is the capability. All domains, all aspects, and probably beyond our imagination. So let me just highlight a few key technology trends that will define the 6G. So the first is the extreme connectivity. That connectivity, we can declare the connectivity supremacy because it's the first time we probably access all the available radiation spectrum that wireless will work on, and the whole entire network will map on, so that we're going to entering the terahertz. So with all this spectrum and all the infrastructure of the radio wireless infrastructure about that, this will be reaching that capability that all the previous generation do not have, because they are partially access certain spectrum gradually step by step, and the networks build up is accumulated over many years. So this is one of the power when the connectivity technology become a dominance. Then it will imply that all the interaction, human interaction, machine interaction, reality, and all this will be in this one network. There are many other aspects of extreme aspect of the network that will be capable. Then when we enter in 6G, for example, in terms of a very fast response, in terms of connectivity to connect everything that we have, even reach 1 trillion of the consumer stuff, and many reliability, and with the satellite integration, there will be everywhere connected. That is never have this realization be in the previous generation. So the second key technology trend that will entering define 6G is the AI cyber world. So that digital world will become much more intelligence and could reach the human level of intelligence with that movement, so that many of humans' works and the interaction or jobs will be upgraded and advanced to a more creative, that type of future reality. And then third one is trustfulness. That means the network and all the communication, computing, storage, interaction will be more built on the trustworthiness because of the policy and diversity and even the sovereignty requirement from different regions. So the technology will prevail, will solve the problem during that time rather than by some other means. So number 4 is the combined sensing and the communication. So the sensing and communication will be integrated together. The that the network can understand and intelligently provide assistance to every applications and that. So the number 5 is everybody talking about the terahertz radio. That's the new area for the technology. All of this, we will not forget there was a disruption, exciting technology of the very low orbit satellite system that will add on to the 6G. Next chart. The success of a 6G is a very long journey, and there is no doubt that the essential ingredient of 6G is to build up a much more wider ecosystem, and together to shape the 6G. The 6G critical element for this success, we think, is the cross verticals. Many verticals will be in this platform. And second is innovation driven, and we believe there will be endless innovation that will push forward for the impact of a 6G. And third one is still essential, is a global scale. That is the economic foundation for this any global type of a platform. Number 4, it should be open and access for all the players and all the actors, all the the innovation. And then number 5 is the natively intelligence. And the last but not least, let's not forget the social responsibility, that the sustainable is remain a critical element for 6G. So that's what is our very high level view on the 6G, and we're very happy to work with the friend and across all the globe, and so we can define the 6G together. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I think I like how these presentations build upon each other. I think there's a clear story. I think it was very interesting to understand your perspective as well, and to see how the various pieces act together. I think we're already up for an interesting discussion, and I have a few questions myself already, kind of from these various contributions. But I'll hold off for the moment, and I'll introduce the next speaker, who is Matti Latva-Aho, who's the director of the 6G flagship that has already been mentioned earlier in the panel discussion. So, Matti, good afternoon. Nice to have you on the panel.
Good afternoon, Mark, and everybody else. Greetings from very snowy northern Finland. We are almost at 1 meter level of snow already, so we have a real snow blast going on here. Can I have the second slide split? All right, so what is going on at the moment already at the emergence of 5G is that we are witnessing another major revolution in technologies, namely when we are trying to connect rest of the parts of modern societies wirelessly to internet. We really need new technologies to make it happen. So technology is the key enabler for it. But what we have to understand far better is to what are underneath value chains and most prominent business models for really making this development happening in a holistic manner. And that's probably something we haven't yet got right, as we have seen that these new types of communications for massive machine type communications or ultra reliable type of communications hasn't really yet started picking up. Of course, technology is not completely mature yet, but I dare to claim that we don't understand well enough the business logic behind all these potentially new verticals and related value chains, where the composition of key players can vary drastically. next one, please. So let's talk about a moment. What are the key drivers towards 6G? What are the reasons for starting the development right now? Isn't 5G enough? So maybe we have to speculate a little bit about the things that what are probably overlooked a little bit so far, and what needs to be taken into consideration for the next phase. And the societal factors are, from our point of view, the most important ones. There are two major things that we have to consider. First of all, digitalization of societies, which is happening in all modern societies around the world, and really those are enabling completely new ways of doing things, and maybe getting rid of annoying routine tasks from us humans. Then the secondly is coming from United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, all 17 of those, which start to necessitate actually a new characteristic for the next generation system, which is global connectivity to enable digital inclusion. So currently about half of world's population has no connectivity to internet, and most easy way to do it in countries and areas without proper infrastructure is to probably try to do it over wireless links. So we have to look at really lots of different alternative solutions for connecting, in particular, remote areas and poor countries, but also we have blind spots in most of developed countries. Also, a good example is, for example, northern Scandinavia, where we have really sparsely populated areas and not complete. We talked a little bit about these new systems and vertical areas, which are renewing the business landscape, and it's really going to cause holistic explosion of deployment of wireless technologies for future applications. And if that is true, and if that is really taking place, then the third one, the security-related matters, come to the spotlight, and we have to really pay special attention to take care of those properly. And in modern societies where we have lots of open data, we have to also look after privacy preserving data sharing concepts, and make sure that privacy is kept in all types of applications and networks. So that will be a big challenge when we have new players coming into the operation of different parts of the wireless networks, offering totally new types of services. And this radio technology, of course, we engineers, we love radio technology, most of all things, and there's a great potential and promise now at higher spectrum bands, going all the way to terahertz frequencies, which will enable quite fantastic means for accurate localization and three-dimensional imaging possibilities and other sensing capabilities. But then we have to understand that without breaking the laws of physics, I think it will mean that we are talking about relatively short-range connectivity systems and rather localized solutions. So these lower spectrum bands, of course, will remain as the most important ones to provide large area coverage, and this locally we can really have super high data rates by allowing the use of higher frequencies. Then this artificial intelligence, I believe it was discussed by a previous speaker quite a bit already, and that this intelligence is really coming to be part of the networks and optimization of the networks, but not to underestimate all variety of applications where it can really give us totally new types of user experiences. The last but not least, probably the biggest driver amongst all is that by history we can see that every 10 years there's a new mobile communication standard. And the next one will be there in 28, 29 roughly. And I already mentioned that business gets reshaped about 20 years cycles, But one thing that we have to also seriously start to consider, do we need different type of spectrum regulation principles enabling this holistic birth of different vertical applications, and to enable, let's say, different players to start to invest in building networks, managing networks, and providing services of different sorts. Thank you for your attention.
Matti, thank you very much. That was we're continuing to dig step by step into the detail here on the matter. I hear from Dan that lots of questions are already coming in. I have to refrain from asking too much, so thank you very much for your contribution. I'm sure we'll talk more about it in a few minutes. But for now, let me introduce the final speaker of today's panel, who is Diego Lopez, who's head of tech exploration, Telefónica. Diego, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon to you, Mark, and to everybody. Dan, if you can start showing the slides. Basically, the idea when discussing about this and thinking about how to address the panel, I thought that more than focusing on a particular generation or a particular aspect of the network, the idea is that my idea was to share with you our vision that what we're talking is about a continuum in both directions, in breadth and width, breadth and depth, sorry. And we're talking about the continuum or we are trying to address a continuum of the evolution of technology. I believe that 4G, 5G, 6G are quite appealing names, and this is something that you can use, but it's true that, for example, as Colin was talking about the evolution when we started working on the 5G foundations and all the like, the truth is that we have applied a lot of the technologies we used to when researching on 5G have been backported into 4G, into 4G services in building ICT services of whatever the nature. And this is something that we foresee as well with 6G. Many of the research that will be labeled 6G in the future very likely will be applied in the former generation. Can you move on to the next slide? And this is why we are trying precisely to invent something that's sort of a unified ICT when you have a single service space in which you are combining communications and you're combining information technology in something that is, again, what we call ICT, and it's about something that is consistent for both not only for service providers and users, but as well to users, service providers, and a third kind of stakeholder that is extremely important, that are service developers. The idea is that, well, as I said, you build once and you run whatever you build anytime, anywhere, on demand. The idea is that, the deployment patterns, and this is something very much connected with that Matti was mentioning before, focus on spectrum, is precisely the idea that the combination of public and non-public infrastructures, freely combination, even ad hoc combination of them is quite important, and supporting having it completely open, and that implies in all dimensions. It's not only open in the sense that different providers can interconnect, it's open in the sense that different service developers can move their applications from one environment to another, is that users can freely combine services and applications, is that providers can freely combine technology pieces, etc. And in the long term, what we foresee is something that so far we have named in-network computing. Probably we will have to find a more appealing name, a catchy name for it. But the idea is that we will have, as I said, a continuum of services that will be enabled by devices, network devices that are programmable and indistinguishable, basically, of computers or computing facilities, completely decentralized security and discovery mechanisms, and what is very important, because we are talking about ICT convergence, is a set of languages and constructs that allow the implementation of network functions that are completely location independent and user aware. For all of this, what we need is precisely the idea that at the end we need mechanisms for supporting end-to-end orchestration of everything. And then, can you move on? Then we have the challenges. That is precisely a matter of balance. I have identified several aspects that are extremely important that we balance. One is the heterogeneity, the natural heterogeneity of networks. We are going to live with a network or increasing heterogeneous elements with a holistic view of the whole system, so you can provide consistent set of services. On the one hand, as usual, and this is something that the two following ones are typical of any computing and networking environment, but will have further reinforced by the huge pervasiveness and this continuum effect. One is about how you balance between user requirements and operational policies, and how you are able to find a way of combining them in something that provides an infrastructure that is robust and reliable. Second is about, the usual tussle between usability and security and between agility and regulations. And this is something that is not only a technology, but also a policy and even a cultural challenge of finding the right balance. How we deal with the full closed loop operation in which you fire and forget, you deploy and forget, with the need that we are running infrastructure that will become more and more critical. And finally, is the idea of balancing, and this is important as well when we're talking about smart environments, how we balance what we sense, what we measure, how we measure what we want to measure, with how we act and where and how we define the actions and how they are translated into activity in different parts of the network. We have been talking about smart networks several times. We have mentioned this. The idea or the paradigm we have in mind is precisely of the human nervous system, in which we have different arches for control, more automatic, more directly dedicated to sensing the periphery, more central, more focused on the senses that are close to our brain, like vision, for example. And for sure, there's everything that is central that is associated with the processing of the whole self-awareness as a whole, precisely, and taking decisions according to plans and ideas, etc. So this balance, this convergence, is what we believe will bring the natural evolution on, as I said, towards a continuum of services and of all kinds, network and computing, and it would support a continuous evolution of the different generations, if you want. And that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diego. I think it was a fascinating way to look at it and to kind of close off this session contributions, which again, a big thank you to all the speakers. I think, at least to me, it's become the idea of 6G has become much clearer. I think it's a clear step further from what kind of the ambitions that, when we talked a few years ago about 5G, there were certain ambitions and they were defined, but this kind of, it looks to me like it's a much more kind of a comprehensive view at networks and the interdependence between different, let's say, nodes in this network, whatever they may be, and how this all works together. So thanks again to all of you. And we have about half an hour left for Q&A. We've already had a few questions come in from the audience. I may start, if that's okay, with a question on terminology. We had a question on whether the panelists could clarify what is meant by B5G. I think it's a term we actually haven't discussed in the panel. So Colin, if you're...
Let me give my view of where this is and what this is. So it really comes back, in my view, to what I said earlier, that we are still at the beginning of the 5G story. And so going back 18 months, the idea of starting talking about 6G was seen as actually quite dangerous, because obviously for many companies and organizations, 5G is the current subject in terms of deployment, in terms of technology, in terms of development. And the danger is if you start talking about 6G too early, then you say, then maybe I'll wait for 6G, maybe I don't need 5G. And that's the last thing that the industry wants. 5G still has a lot of life and a lot of development. So before, in my view, Beyond 5G was seen as a more neutral title. But in my view, Beyond 5G fundamentally means 6G, and now we should not be using the Beyond 5G nomenclature. That is no longer current. We now use 6G, it's out there, it's open. Now, what makes things a little more complicated is, because we're at the beginning of the 5G story, there may well be some qualifier for future releases of 5G. So we might have 5G advanced or whatever else. So typically with these generations, or it has happened with generations, that we have used some addition, some 4G plus or whatever else. We've coined some other expression to relate the two evolution releases of a technology, and that might happen. But in my view, that's not what I see, at least, as Beyond 5G. Beyond 5G is a nomenclature I think we shouldn't be using. We should be using 5G evolution, and we should be using 6G. Thank you.
I was actually wondering, in that context, whether I was about to challenge whether it's actually important to get hung up on the number of the G. A lot of the ambitions that people kind of explain in 5G probably actually won't be realized in 5G, probably will take a bit of time. But I think the point you're making is an interesting one, that just to focus the discussion, it's actually important to have fairly clearly defined terms. And whether you can then realize everything with 6G is a whole different question to kind of what the different terms actually are, or what kind of, what's meant with the terms. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on the topic of B5G, or whether it's okay to move on. Yes, please, Wen. I think you're muted.
Sorry, yes, I may have a very simple clarification if I can. It has to be clear that 5G has its longer life, more than 10 years, and it will have its own track of evolution from the first version of 5G, and keep increasing the capability. And then there are certain point that it will be emerging with the 6G. So this is not a new thing for us as an industry. So we see this from same discussion at 3G and 4G, 4G and 5G, and 5G and 6G. And I don't think there will be a different or exception that beyond 5G is different story than we have at beyond 4G.
Okay, I concur very much. I'll just progress the discussion a little bit. And we had a question via YouTube that was focused on the question that, kind of recognize that 3GPP has done a great job in bringing us to where we are today. But that apparently there seems to be interest from industry to bring in disruptive technologies that are not part necessarily of the 3GPP progress into 6G. Do any of you as panelists have a view on this? Is it a good idea, Diego?
Well, when it comes to this idea of the disruption, something that we should not forget, and this is something that I tried to insist during my short presentation, is the fact that we are talking about openness, about open networks. If I have a extremely good idea, I have a very disruptive idea, whatever, and I deploy it on my own, and what I am trying to do is precisely to become a de facto or de jure monopoly, because I had the good idea. I mean, it's something that is as a vision, as an aspiration, is something that is perfectly legitimate. That precisely goes against the spirit of why we are building networks, why we are building something that allows us boxes, that allows us, well, or allowed us to move around the world, not any longer, or this is not for the moment, and to connect everywhere to everywhere. With a disruptive proprietary technology, that would have not been possible, simply. The problem, I mean, 3GPP and other bodies, and you can name it, whatever the standardization bodies, they are complicated, they are lengthy, they are slow, but basically because we humans, is not a fault of the bodies, is a fault of humans, because we humans are difficult. It's completely difficult to reach consensus, even when there are no interests. And there is only my self-esteem what is at stake. It's difficult to find a consensus. When we're talking about, for sure, we're talking real serious money, it's even more difficult. And the process is not because 3GPP is evil or bad or slow or whatever else. It's simply because if you put, I don't know, 200 people in a room and you have to find a common approach for that, it takes time. And it will take time, whatever the process we have, and it will take time because and it has to take time because it's the only guarantee we have for a common open environment.
Colin, I think you wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to absolutely support that view that 3GPP is not perfect, and part of that is due to its own success, that there are so many parties that have interests there, whether it's verticals or telecoms or whatever else. So there are a lot of different opinions there. But if we want a successful basis for our industry, if we wish a world standard, and I would imagine everyone on this call in this panel would very much subscribe to, that is why our industry is successful. It's because we have a single global standard. To do that and to do it with quality, then you need to put in the effort, and then by its nature it's complicated, and finding the consensus is complicated. But if you try and do it some other way, there is no shortcut. If you have the shortcut, then the shortcut will be in quality. You will get something where it simply won't work out of the box. You simply won't have interactions that will function. You will have handsets that maybe work over there, maybe with this one, but not overall in the world. The ability to take any handset, switch it on, and it works anywhere, that is not a given. That is something of a huge amount of hard work of 30 or 40 years of development in terms of process and governance to actually support that. And that is what 3GPP provides you. Is it lightning fast? No. Is it perfect? Probably also not. But it's the best solution we have. We would be very unwise to throw that away or let anyone else throw that away, in my view.
Yeah, I think anybody who traveled probably about 20 years ago and tried to do phone calls in different countries, so may have kind of come across that, and we may have forgotten about this by now. Matti, I think you wanted to contribute on this topic as well.
Yeah, I was reading this question carefully, and actually I have a little bit different view to this. If you think about human-centric, let's say mobile handset-centric future generations, for sure there must be a global standard for it. But the big promise from 5G was not really only on faster and faster mobile broadband, but it was somewhere else. It was this massive IoT and also ultra reliable low latency communications. Especially this URLLC is an area where we are really pushing technology to the ultimate limit what physics can promise us. And in order to make it successful, we must have a little bit more customized solutions for specific verticals, which this simple, let's say, of course, it's not simple to implement, but let's say this network slicing can never attain. And we need also customized solution for some of the important verticals, and there's room for customization, I think.
There's probably just to kind of bring it back to Diego's presentation, there's probably a question of kind of whether you would want to inject kind of a disruptive technology straight into your body, or whether you would kind of, maybe there's something next to it where you would be happy to try it out and then kind of take it from there, so to say, to not disrupt the system. Yes, Bernard.
I just wanted to say that from a European Commission perspective, we are very much attached, or we very much support this process of global standardization. We believe that this is something which is really fundamental to realize, let's say, global interoperability for systems. But sometimes in the mind of people, standardization sounds like a lack of differentiation. And I would like to say this is not exactly the case. That's not exactly the way I see it. The way you look at a 4G platform, for instance, 4G is a standardized platform, but it has allowed the whole app economy to flourish, and no one expected it to happen. This platform has allowed the Ubers, the Twitters, and all this type of stuff, which was not even anticipated when 4G was standardized. So what I believe, or what we believe from a Commission perspective, that when we are moving into 5G, where there will be even more opening of the networks towards third-party innovation, this innovation capability and this differentiation capability will be even more huge, and this will reconcile both of two worlds. On the one hand, the standardized platform which allows global interoperability, and in the second, what Colin mentioned, which is the platform for innovation that allows innovator to flourish on top of this platform. So for us, the two things are intimately coupled.
Which actually kind of, I think, brings us nicely to two other questions that the audience has asked, which is all about the question of slightly given by the title about sovereignty, about European-led 5G and beyond, or 6G, as I hope we've all learned today. So there's two questions. I put them together. The first question was that that people see US, Japanese, Korean, European initiatives for 6G. Are these governments trying to secure IP? Is there a risk of a race to become the first mover and get an advantage? And is there a risk of fragmentation, or is it better to pick up again to try and do this in a joint effort? So how should Europe position itself in this let's call it 6G race for the moment, but maybe there's a different way around it. And then ingrained in their question is, there's one way to look at it, Europe versus the world, but of course, even within Europe, as anybody who lives in the UK knows, there's different microcosms as well. So the question is for a country like the UK, should the UK go on its own? Where is the UK strongest? So maybe if we could have a view around from everybody in the panel on how to position. Maybe I don't know, Colin, you maybe you want to go first. You seem
maybe I could go first though. Yeah. So in terms of clearly there's competition in 6G. There are these other regional and national activities in 6G, but I don't think we should see that negatively, and I don't think we should say, oh, this means fragmentation has to happen. Yeah? There's always been, if you look at 5G, if you look at 4G, if you look at 3G, there were all these regional activities, and generally we need to have a lot of fundamental research to get the best solutions. So in principle, that is, I don't think we should see that as a problem. I think that's positive. The important thing is that we have the global standardization. Sorry, there seems to be at least some feedback audibly on my mic. We need that global standardization to bring that all back together and to make sure that we come up with one global standard. And I see the much bigger risk as geopolitical tensions rather than necessarily national research programs. Now, relative to what role Europe should take, in my view, there is an opportunity for Europe in 6G to take the role it did in 5G, which is trying to be the place where the various different organizations or regions come together. So we have all these different activities. Somewhere we need to get that pre-standardization consensus. We need the big players talking to each other and saying, well, there's all these ideas. This may be a good subset to take further to standardization. It's not making the final decision necessarily, but it's trying to bring that basic research together and make some sort of down selection, perhaps is the word, but trying to make some in a non-competitive environment, try and discuss what the possible solutions for the fundamental building blocks will be. That is something we've done in 5G PPP, and I hope it's something we can do in smart networks and services for 6G. Of course, we have to see whether it happens or not, but for me, that's one of the key things we should try and do. And then coming to your last point, the UK, well, I'm afraid it's the same situation. It's very much a mentality point of view. There are those who feel the UK is stronger on its own. If you look at the geopolitical situation, if people really believe that the UK is in a stronger position when it's dealing with huge blocks like the North America or China or things like that, or whether it is better dealing as the whole block, as a European block, to me the answer is clear. I'm in principle a European. To me, if you really want to influence something, you've got to be at the table for discussion. And if the UK tries to do things alone, I think it will find it very difficult to bring those ideas forward. And when we're doing research, it is not a closed activity. The power of research is to talk to different people with different opinions and bring that together. And limiting it to the UK and not involving Europe or indeed other parts of the world, to me, that will limit the results of that research. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Colin. I think I agree with many of the things you said, but I'll just keep passing around to Bernard. Maybe I'll take you next.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, you said, or someone said, the race is started, but the problem is that the race is started. No one knows exactly to where it is started, and there is still a lot of common understanding to get towards where we are heading to. Again, as I said, the ITU doesn't plan to have a vision document before early 2023. The standardization roadmap might be initiated sometimes in 2025. So there is still a lot of opportunities which are opened by technological progresses, but all this bottom-up technological progress that can be kind of integrated into future platforms, we need to develop a kind of system concept out of it and a business concept out of it. And this is, in my view, that's not yet there. So at this moment in time, we have a lot of contacts with Japan, with Korea, with Asia in general, and there is a lot of demand, or there are a lot of requests for us to cooperate with these regions to try precisely to come up with a kind of unified system concept. So at this moment in time, where, as Colin said, we are really in a research mode and in pre-competitive mode, I think there is a good enough willingness to cooperate across the world. When things can become more competitive, then possibly things will change. But at this moment in time, I believe that all together, at least that's what we are seeing from the Commission perspective. We believe that there is a reasonable interest across regions to try to define what will be the overriding system concept towards this type of this new generation of networks or platforms.
Thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it feels like when you look at the 5G discussion, a lot of the getting ahead questions were around kind of making the frequencies available, kind of making sure that the right regulation are in place to acquire network sites, to make sure you can radiate. So
if I may just one second expand on that, I can give you an example on 5G, for instance. When we started 5G, the whole world was convinced that eMBB was the only solution. You would talk to people, they would tell you the only business case that will work is eMBB, and maybe still today. The vertical story came much later. So at some stage, when we were walking the process, things change a little bit, and new opportunities emerge and new ideas emerge. And I believe this is going to be the same in 6G. As we walk the talk, several new things will come up, and the more we think of it, the more we will see new opportunities, new ideas, and this will be integrated in such a way that at some stage it becomes a full system concept. But I don't think we are yet there. At this moment in time, we are more in the bottom-up technological initiative.
Yeah, and I think many people who've been involved in the kind of the early 5G discussions kind of see many of the ideas that were in 5G kind of taken a step further now with 6G. At least it feels to me that way. Matti, can I pass on to you?
Thank you. So I think Bernard already referred to this ITU definition for 6G that will take place 2022-23 timeframe, and they will define what IMT 2030 will be. The requirements, technical requirements for it. They cannot define it without research. It's important. It's really important that these research activities are taking place right now. And it's excellent that there are different research groups around the world, because we need different opinions. And it's not yet time even to try to agree about the same path. It comes later. And then finally, World Radio Conference will then say that, okay, these are your frequencies, and then everybody goes like crazy to that direction. So that has been happening many times before. It's happening again. But now it's a little bit different, maybe because the expectations towards 6G, since 5G has made such a big promise, the expectations are bigger than ever before. And of course, we need to have, let's say, more research activities, more longer-term research in order to try to meet to that big promise, 6G being so much better compared to 5G.
You say the expectation for 6G are bigger. Your presentations watered my mouth for what the possibilities are with it. Diego, I don't know if you wanted to comment any further on the question of sovereignty of international.
No. When it comes, I mean, there is two different aspects here. Is sovereignty is one thing. Is that you retain some capacity of not having to exclusively rely on others to provide a certain set of technology goods, whatever they are. This is one thing. Keeping some sovereignty doesn't imply that you have the very best or you're dominating the rest of the world. It's simply that you have the capacity. And I think that for sure this is important, and I think this is important. And personally, I'm a real believer in, for example, in the agriculture policy of the EU that I know has a very long story of many people being against it, because I do believe that we have to guarantee a food sovereignty that is essential, and that's something. This is a little bit the same, guaranteeing a certain degree of ability to do so, for sure. On the other hand, that doesn't imply that you're going to close or put barriers on anything. I mean, it's something. If somebody is able to make whatever cheaper, faster, better looking, I'm fine. And probably I would buy these let's say foreign things. The other point is that when it comes to having the ability, right now, for example, I know we are not able we are not manufacturing mobile phones so far as I can tell. But I do believe that we have the capacity of manufacturing them if it were necessary in a reasonably good term. And this is what I understand as sovereignty. Apart from that, collaboration, I mean, I fully agree. We have to have global collaboration. Whatever the generation, whatever the evolution of the network, is going to be global or it won't be. That's as simple as that.
Perfect. Can I also before I pass to you, can I actually mix the question that question we've just been discussing with, just being caught of time, also a questions on my mind, which is all about kind of moving a bit to the technology side as well. There was a question from the panel whether there will be a new 6G radio interface and frequency bands. And maybe more generally, kind of, what is your view on how these 6G networks may look like? And I know it may be too early, but just maybe if kind of a first win.
Yeah. So to answer the aspect of the sovereignty or the countries and driven different 6G, I think the nature of all this will still follow the model that we have, the pre-competitive stage and the competitive stage, because this is a proven process of the model that market-driven. If we are following the market-driven, it is a good thing that the different regions start to promote push 6G, and then they have a competitiveness in terms of idea, in terms of the different mind of what it looks like, and then we harmonize this in the certain body like ITU-T that ITU-R or we did before, and then the process going on. And when you have a global standardization on the global scale, and then it's entering the competitive stage, then all these other things come into play. What different and risky in the 6G time frame is at the early pre-competitive stage could be potential driven and dominant by the geopolitical aspect. So that's, I think, the key aspect for 6G. Otherwise, I think that it is people's, and we all know how to react all this at the 4G and the 5G time. So one additional comment is that look at the 40 years, 50 years mobile history. The regional standards do not have a single case of a success. So that lesson we may learn the 6G one more time again. So, but it's a good reference compared to a few occasions as before. So go back to the 3GPP standardization for the past 20 years, and it's always robust to handle those aspects as well. And it does have the capability and mechanics to embrace the new innovation, but in a different manner of the way. So go back to the new air interface or the technology. This is a technical question. I think the 6G depends on where we do with 6G. I'll give you one example. So UMTS actually can do internet access, but that air interface do not support massive mobile broadband like we have a smartphone today. So that this LTE is the right air interface to do with that generation. So I think once we clear what is 6G to do, it will be very clear what is the technology for the new air interface for 6G. What I believe will be huge massive of the AI as a dominant service. So we have to tailor this access technology to optimize for that, as we did for LTE is truly optimization for the TCP/IP protocol. Otherwise, the UMTS can handle that scale and to support that business.
Maybe I'm just going to throw in a little teaser here. Kind of when I heard your presentations, kind of one topic that was in my mind a lot was topic of security, because I guess the more complex networks become and the more data is exchanged, the more users as well may become concerned with what happens to their data. Now, this is probably a topic you could discuss for hours, and I'll just point out that there is a session on the topic of security tomorrow in this conference. So I think we should probably stay kind of fairly clear of that, as much as I'd like to go into it. But being aware of time, there maybe just to end this session, it may be nice to look at the transition from 5G to 6G. And there was a question again from the audience, whether we believe as a panel that the EU has done a good job to foster innovation and support SMEs in the 5G ecosystem, and what could be improved for 6G. So maybe if all of you kind of give me a kind of a quick kind of summary of what you thought went well, or what you think can do better, and how we actually, is there something we can learn about how we move from 4G to 5G and how we will move from 5G to 6G? So maybe this time I'll start with you.
Yeah, so for the SME success, there is always a big plenty of room on this type of a platform. The question is, the success model for the SMEs. Is it the capital driven or the venture capital driven? That's where the US was very successful of that, or is somehow the private and public organized well model that some of the success, some are not success, because the SME has a lot of variables which are unknown. The success rate is naturally very low. So who will take? I'm pretty sure there are many innovation people that will take this risk and go this venture, but who will provide them a supported financial and regulatory type of help in order for them to have a competitiveness in the very early start.
Great. I'll just go around to Diego. Maybe any final comments from your side?
I'll try to be very brief. That depends on the SME. I mean, if we're talking about aggressive ICT SMEs that are startups and that want to grab a big piece of the part of the market or become a multinational in a short time, I'm not sure the number of multinationals we have right now in Europe probably is lower than when everything started. But if we're talking about the SMEs, the normal company that is trying to leverage technology to reach some other markets or to improve their production processes, I do believe there has been a success. I'm talking about people that are growing wine, or people that are building pieces for car manufacturing, people that are doing, let's say, normal traditional economy. They have had a much better access to the technology, have had the opportunity to explore use cases, and well, all in all, to get it at a reasonable price, I'd say.
Perfect. Can I maybe then for the final three panelists just also ask in view of the transition from 4G to 5G? I know, as we mentioned before, 6G is in very early stages, but are there things to keep in mind when thinking about 6G of how to get there in as smooth a way as possible? Maybe Colin, you're nodding, so maybe I'll go to you.
Yeah, I think that is perhaps something that we should learn from 5G. So in my view, and this is a personal view, not related to the association or anyone else, in my view, we probably didn't think enough of that transition early enough. Now, obviously today we're talking about, 6G is an empty term. We don't know what it means. Okay, it's the emperor's new clothes. There's nothing there. But at some point we will begin to understand the basic technologies, and at some later point we will get some basic system design. And what I think we need to do is fairly early in the process think about, what does this mean for migration? And when we talk about migration, clearly it's operators, but it's also the verticals and other people. In other words, we need to think earlier about how we can bring this technology into the marketplace and how we can transition from the existing cellular technology to the new technology, or divide the market, that the existing technology does IoT and the new technology concentrates on blue elephants. But the point is to have a strategy for that and not run into that problem once we've finished or almost finished 6G standardization.
Yeah. Rather, if we were in Brussels today, I'd focus on pink elephants, because there's a fantastic here, but that's not going to that. Bernard, yes.
Yeah, just to add to what Colin said, I believe we have done our best to expand the 5G universe towards the vertical and the use cases in the 5G domain. So I think this is something which has been reasonably successful and which has had its own impact in involving SMEs into the overall ecosystems. So that's my belief. I believe that for 6G, for the discussion on 6G, we on the European side, we have to concentrate much more than we did in the past, and also in the context of this sovereignty discussion, is on the microelectronics and components industry, because this is really, in our view, a key industry to make these systems to emerge. And if we want to have a kind of sovereign or as complete as possible supply chain, we cannot really afford not to have the basic enabling components from a European perspective. So this is something where we want to go very much in detail, or we want to put some emphasis on that, because we believe that we have to look at the full chain from the components to the application, which is not necessarily the approach we took for the 5G European programs in the past.
Very interesting point. I know Dan is getting very restless in the background, but Matti, just to also give you the floor one final time, do you have any final comments or kind of important aspects you wanted to make sure kind of are discussed as well?
I have absolutely no views on these SMEs. Maybe I don't think European funding instruments are fast enough for the needs of relatively fast-changing needs of SMEs. But I would like to go back a little bit to this air interface question, and it really will depend a lot on which frequency band will be allocated to 6G. We know for sure that there are better ways than simple, basic filtered OFDM that is now basis for 5G to do the job for below 6 gigahertz. So definitely there is possibility for better air interfaces. It's a matter of complexity at the end of the day and cost.
Perfect. Well, again, at this point, Dan, you have me to come out of the background and and the session. But a big thank you from my side to all 5G. I've rarely had such a diverse panel and kind of have such a kind of national input from all sides. So thanks very much for that. It was very interesting. I personally have learned a lot about 6G, even if it isn't particularly well defined yet. But at least I've learned about what's going on to make sure it will become defined. And I'm quite excited to hear more about this as we'll progress in the next few years. So Dan, all floors are yours again.
Thank you, Mark. And yeah, agree. That was a fascinating panel. I'm just wondering how long it's going to be till we have to change this conference to the European 6G conference. But I think we've maybe got a couple of years. But yeah, at some point down the line. But Mark, yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think I'll echo Mark's thanks to all of our panelists as well. It was a absolutely fascinating discussion again, and we covered a huge amount of different issues, but managed to keep that relatively focused. And yeah, really interesting discussion there. So thank you all very much for that. So that's pretty much it for today. So thank you everyone out there for all of your participation today. We've had some really interesting discussions, some fascinating panels, and really appreciate all of your comments and questions, which have been a very big part of the discussions as well. So thank you all very much for your participation. We're back again tomorrow. So we're starting at the same time tomorrow at 10 o'clock CET. Where we're going to be moving on to, first of all, be looking at the issue of security and resilience, before we look at more sustainability and looking at the role that 5G can play in delivering sustainability, and also how 5G can be rolled out in the most sustainable way as well. So looking at that issue there, before we then move on to look at a topic that's been brought up in, I think, one of the earlier sessions today, the connectivity toolbox. So looking at how some of the obstacles to and costs, I suppose, for 5G network rollout can be brought down. So all of that tomorrow. We also have another round of showcase sessions tomorrow as well. So another busy day. So thank you all, everyone. Thank you to Mark and the panelists. Thank you to our own earlier panelists as well. Wishing everyone a very pleasant evening, and looking forward to seeing you all back here tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Thank you very much.